Hey, what's up, everybody? Salty Dogs podcast here. This is an episode that we thought needed to happen right away. Usually we record every other Tuesday, but we needed to get in here and have a conversation. And so we've got Pastor Dioane Gates with us tonight. He pastors a church here in Wichita, Kansas. He's a friend of mine. I know him. I love him. I appreciate him.
Good dude. Solid dude.
Really solid guy. Ex or retired law enforcement. Yeah. And a man of God. And so we've invited you here tonight to have a much needed conversation about things that are happening in culture today. And so we've titled this, I Can't Breathe. I think it's obvious to everybody what that's about. But when we asked you what we should title this episode, that's what you said. And so start us off by diving into that. And let's just kind of talk about everything that's been going on lately. And we listened to one of your sermons.
Yeah, all three of us did. We all tuned in.
Yeah, from Sunday.
We had a little group chat going.
I text Jason immediately, man. Like,
we all blasted that bad boy out, man.
I did. I was like, bro, like, we have got to get us. And, you know, we all agreed, man. And we just felt the urgency about it. And especially, man, like just hearing from where you come from and your viewpoint on it is so unique because you have a platform and we felt that we have a platform too, as small though it may be. And we have a responsibility, you know what I mean? If you have a platform like that, you have a responsibility.
Right.
And, that sermon on Sunday was
it kind of sparked
heat,
this like
dude.
Immediately after service. I just went up to him and invited him on. You can check out mendingplace.org and you can do a listen to sermons now. Yeah. And there's a link to the sermon titled Crushed. And
Jordan or Jason, I thought you were going to potentially drop that sermon in our feed as well, or drop a link or something like that.
We're gonna share that sermon in our podcast feed as well.
Sweet.
Yeah. So thanks for being here.
No,
thank you.
Yeah,
for real. Thank you.
Me. It really is a great time to exercise all platforms and influence to help people, and so I'm excited about having the conversation we're going to have, and it really speaks true to what I've been challenging everybody else to do anyway. I've been saying that I want people to get into rooms, to sit at tables, to have conversations, and to challenge themselves to be uncomfortable and challenge themselves to make progress internally before we can really make progress externally. And so I believe this conversation should have that. If you're listening online, it should have that tension to it, you know, and I want that tension there. I want people to feel like, oh my God, I hope they don't talk about that. And then for us to talk about it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's kind of what our podcast has been about.
Yeah, well, I've watched it. I've watched before.
And you're still my friend.
Yeah.
Hey,
good.
brother. Thank you. Yeah, so I can't breathe, you know.
Yeah.
Kick us off, man.
Yeah, lace us up.
Yeah, well, I think obviously there's everyone has different viewpoints on what that really means and symbolizes. For me, as a black male living in our society, I think what we saw with George Floyd and others is a picture of systemic racism. It's a picture of the pressures and societal woes that minorities, specifically black men, black women, have been experiencing for a long time. It's not new for us. It's not a new anger. It's not a new frustration. It's not a new position that we've found ourselves under the knee of society. But to be now in a place to where it's being seen, and we don't want people to look away. To see someone die, whether you watch the video or not, but to see someone die, it's a very carnal and visceral. It's very primal to see someone die, especially through strangulation, through suffocation, through asphyxia. It's a tough thing to look at. And when I've seen footage, things online of people who were fighting for their life, it's very, very primal. It's something that even Hollywood's best opportunity or best actors cannot depict totally, because it's so. I have to go all the way there to be able to express what it's like to fight for my life. And I believe what we're seeing in our culture, seeing in our society, is we see people fighting for their life, this unrest, this frustration, and some of us have the option to look away. And then there's others who we have never been able to look away. We've seen it before, but we've just held silence with it. You know, it's something that we whispered in rooms or in groups with people who look like us. We talked about issues and pressures that have been placed on us, but to not have a place where you can have evidence to say that really did happen. And I think that's what's really, I think, different this time, is because we're looking at the evidence in just such a different way that, and I think it's a tipping point. It's not only just this one incident with George Floyd, but it's with others that have come along that we heard about, but we necessarily didn't see footage. We heard about, we necessarily believe the evidence we heard about, but we couldn't put ourselves in that place, but to actually look at the footage live and to see it again and again. It says that I can't breathe. We are in a position to where many of us have felt that pressure of, if I could just get enough breathing room, if I could just get, some of the woes that we have not necessarily been specifically because Black folks are just unwilling to, but we've been asking for breathing room.
Right.
Can I get enough room to where I can breathe? When you live a life without margin, you don't make the laws, you don't enforce the laws, you don't judge the law, and you don't hold the key to the jail cell.
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, where do I get in to get room? When I'm being under that type of pressure. And it's a unique thing to have someone's foot on your neck, someone's knee on your neck, to have a system riding your back. Not only do we know life is hard in general, but then we have the added pressure of saying that it's easy for you to see my difference, and that difference then for you to marginalize me or think that I'm less than or I can't make it. There's a lot of people who right now, white and Black and brown, who are saying, I'm sick of seeing this. I can't breathe. And I think that's what brings us to the table.
Right.
That is just not, it seems to me that when I see the marches and the pictures of Dr. King and others, that when white America gets sick of seeing it too, right, it's just not enough for one. But when we see our white brothers and sisters who are sick of seeing it too, and of course, we know there's a lot of other stuff going on underneath this and behind the scenes, people playing games and doing crazy stuff outside. But when we see that people are saying, like, I'm standing up, and I know that this will divide, this will cause me to be counted in a way that where people may not like what I'm going to say next. Mm-hmm. They may want to, I feel that way, but I'm nervous about what will happen to me if I stand for or stand against. And this is the hour where history will be more accurate in this hour because of all of our ways of chronologically putting information and memorializing information. History will be more accurate around this event than it has ever been around any event.
Right.
That's a good point.
So Casey, when we got here, we were just kind of like, man, it's a crazy time, huh? And, Casey said, can you believe that one man's actions would cause such a reaction? And I said, it's not just one man's action. It's almost like, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? No, it's kicking the camel while its back's already broken.
Oh, man. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so you're talking about all the other instances that have happened throughout history. Yeah, we got this one on video, and it's a white man kneeling on a Black man's neck. Mm-hmm. Obviously, racism is a situation of the heart. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of hard to know if there was racial motivation or racist motivation in that.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to say whether or not there was or not, but what you're talking about is not just one instance, not just this video,
right?
But all of the other times we've heard and didn't really know.
Yeah.
There was, the evidence, maybe not, different kinds of testimonies, that kinds of thing, that kind of thing.
Right.
But that the primal nature of the video of watching another man fight for his life when it could have easily been handed back to him or sustained with just a simple act of decent humanity.
Yeah. Oh, when you hear a man crying for his mama.
Yeah.
I mean, that's real. You know what I mean? For a grown man to cry for his mother. I mean, I don't know anybody who's ever been in a street fight who cried for his mama. You know what I mean? I don't know anybody who's ever been in a position that at that age, 40-some years old, and you're crying for your mother. That's a tough, man. That's real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, and for for the situation to evolve or devolve to the point to where he's no longer talking anymore. and your foot is still on his neck. I mean, obviously we've seen it. We've seen the footage. We've heard about it. But I get a reaction every time I think about it because of all of his language that he was using. I can't breathe. You know what? My chest is hurting. My stomach is hurting. You know, I mean, he's saying all these things, but when people are saying they're hurting and you ignore it, I mean, we're looking at this in a very micro, but let's blow it up to a macro setting.
Right.
People have been saying, black folks have been saying for a long time, I'm hurting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm hurting. I can't breathe. My stomach is hurting. My back is hurting. My neck. Can you please? And then to get to this point, it says, you know, there's a lot that obviously we can't cover tonight, but when I look at this and I see that picture and I hear those statements, I identify with him. You understand what I'm saying? I think that's what people are doing, that they're identifying with him. Mm-hmm. And that's a powerful concept, to see your brother hurting, or to see, for you, maybe at times you could have looked past it, but to see someone hurting and show empathy, to see that, to come close, to say that I'm going to get close enough to care. And I think that people they've been doing that. They've been getting close to it. Yeah.
You know, it's real interesting. You know, you were talking about this tragedy that happened. It's been interesting to see it play out on social media, because it is making people very uncomfortable because they can't get away from it.
Right.
It's impossible to get away from it. And so this last Saturday, I'm a wedding photographer. I was getting ready to go shoot a wedding. We had a babysitter. I needed to pick up food for the kids and stuff. And so I had managed to continue to keep scrolling by, and I went to the store, and I saw some black people at Aldi, and they were shopping. And it was in that moment that I felt like God addressed my heart, and it was like, how can you just look away? Right. And so it was in a 10-minute drive from my store to the house that God almost gave me this download in my mind of just this massive jolt of empathy, but also addressing my heart as to, hey, Chris, why have you been able to scroll by? Right. Why haven't you been wanting to look at this? And then it was in that moment that I had to wrestle with, okay, well, what's going on? And it was in that moment that I had to get ready for this wedding. I had to get ready to go shoot it, but I sat in my car and I couldn't wait. I typed up a big, long post that, you know, that was from the heart, and I felt like it was what God wanted me to say, and I sent it to a few people to check, and I didn't post it until later that night, but I could not say something. It was at that point, but that only came from God hitting me upside the head and saying, hey, why are you wanting to look away? And so it's interesting to see people in a place to where I think they're getting tired of seeing it in their feed, and it's making them uncomfortable, and they're getting defensive, and so I mean, I don't know, what do you think about all that?
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you were stirred like that. I mean, it not just you, but I'm glad that society is stirred like that. I'm glad that people who normally have the luxury of not being fatigued by this, I'm glad they're getting fatigued.
Right.
Yeah, it just
no longer have the luxury to just to sit back and chill.
Come on, man.
And especially with what you were saying, sorry to interrupt.
No, man, jump in.
But but that death and being able to witness that completely to the end of it, like that's a scary thing. You know what I mean? When you and I was driving today, I was working, and I put myself in that position, as you literally know, but nobody is doing anything around you, and this man is literally choking you to death, and you're on the way out, like the terror, those kind of things, man. And I just was like, dude, all I could say out loud was, God help us, man. That kind of violence on another human being, regardless. And it's interesting to me that people are like, well, I wonder what he did wrong. That's got nothing to do with it. You know what I mean?
Man.
You addressed that in your sermon.
Yeah. There's a fraternity. There's fraternities that some would call them just systems, but they're fraternities that my loyalty to the fraternity is so strong that it won't allow me to break rank. You know, when you see the officers who are standing and watching, and from my law enforcement experience, there's some real things that I don't want to be considered hug a thug. You know what I mean? That's a term that goes on law enforcement. I don't want to be the type of person who cares more for the criminal than I care for the cop. So when we get into situations where we pride, I believe, I don't know the man's heart, so I can't say what was going through his mind in the moment, but it brings us here today. So I will say that I do know what I feel was going on through his mind as far as in law enforcement. You don't back down from people. That's not what you get trained to do.
Right.
So now I'm in a position to where I may have been justified to subdue or bring Floyd down, but then now I got my knee on his neck and people are telling me I'm wrong. And see, pride then creeps in.
Wow.
I'm in authority. So if I remove my knee, it says I was wrong. You see what I'm saying?
You almost get kicked down a peg from your authority.
Yeah.
It's almost like you give up that authority.
So now I don't give up my position because, you know what, I don't want anyone to know that I'm wrong, even if I'm feeling that in my mind. Golly. And this is a tough conversation to have for people who may not be, you not may be familiar with the culture, but I know what it's like to say that, no, we have to have solidarity here in this moment. Mm-hmm. So you don't tap a brother or sister and they say, you all right, man, it's time for you to back out of this. You know what I mean? They were unwilling to even do that. I think that's and how many people in real life have you ever seen someone actually die? Not the world, we just don't see it all the time, at least not in the US, right? Where you just see someone, man, that man just died in front of me. You know what I mean?
And not just, one person. You're talking a large majority of the nation seeing the same event.
The same thing. Yeah. And it's so crystal clear. I think that those fraternities and loyalties have long since been in existence, whether we see them through a police fraternal order of police on streets, or we see them in country clubs, we see them in courtrooms, we see them in hospitals and doctors' offices, we see them in voting booths and registration booths. And we've seen these fraternities. My loyalty is so strong. Even when I know something's wrong, my loyalty is so strong to that fraternity because I can never see myself operating outside of being identified with them. Man. You know what I mean? I belong to community so strongly that I think it alienates us and makes us afraid to stand up. But now in this moment, I'm seeing people who are standing up, and it's beautiful for people to break ranks. I'm breaking rank with my norm, or what is the norm, and I can't say that was good. I can't continue to ignore it or be quiet. And I'm excited about the discomfort, because I know one thing about God is that in that discomfort, He drives us into places we wouldn't otherwise go.
Yeah. Right.
It's that discomfort that I'm praying for. That not the discourse as far as burning buildings and blowing up. Blowing up and lighting cars on fire. I'm not saying that. Right. But I'm saying that the inconvenience.
There's an internal discomfort.
Yeah. Let that sit, because that's the stuff that really makes change. The pressure in this moment needs to stay, and it needs to stay far longer than I want it to for it to really make the change we need.
Dang, man.
It's just like COVID. If COVID would have been 2 weeks, it had just happened and we'd have forgot about it.
Right.
But it stayed long enough to where it would not go away.
It permeated in our minds.
I think that's part of the thing too, is up to now we haven't marinated on anything. Oh, it's a flavor of the week type thing with a lot of those issues that happen, and I remember certain issues that literally after a course of 2 weeks, they moved on to the next story, and it became this backdrop. You know what I mean? Like nobody was paying attention anymore. So you're right about where I felt, like, man, drawn to that statement, to let it marinate. You know what I mean? Let it sit around a while. Till you get inconvenienced. See, it gets to the point to where you get inconvenienced. Now you can't go to the neighborhood you want to go to, or you can't go downtown like you like to, or you can't go and do. It has to be an inconvenience to where you can't watch what you normally watch on TV, to where you can't relax like you normally want to relax in your backyard, to where you don't sleep well like you used to sleep. It has to be that. And I'm just pushing. I think where we sometimes pray, we want to pray away God's plan, because the pain of it, the pressure, it's too uncomfortable. God, please bring peace. No. I want Him to bring that discomfort so that we can finally see movement on this needle, and it not be something that we keep on just talking about until next time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Our last episode was titled "The Disruptive Nature of God." It's exactly that idea that you don't escape the discomfort, or the pressure from the circumstance until it finishes its course.
Right. And it's that discomfort. I mean, I have a group chat with some friends of mine, and when we were constantly, talking about stuff going on in our personal lives, stuff that's going on in the world, all that stuff. And so, I mean, there's been people that have been having conversations with their families, and you're talking about, them being no one in their families is saying anything, and then they can't sit back because that discomfort is too much. Right. And so they pipe up, and then it makes the family uncomfortable. And then there's a little division in the family. I mean, there's that stuff, but that's good. And so I'm seeing lots of people stand up and begin to say things. I'm proud to say that I'm seeing many of my white friends beginning to stand up and beginning to say something.
Yeah, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us to feel uncomfortable together. And what has happened before, it was black folks were really angry. You know what I mean? We were really angry, but no one else was. Right. Or very few people, or people who may have been kind of like a Nicodemus with us. They agreed, but they were in the shadows. You know what I mean? But to have people who are willing to stand and come out of the shadows, that matters. That matters. And I think we need to be courageous and know that there's going to be missteps. There's going to be missteps. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be things that you're going to try and they're going to fail. But we're not asking, again, like I said on Sunday, I'm not asking for perfection. We're asking for experiment. We're asking for you to do something different. It's important.
I wanted to go back to something you said about breaking rank. And I just have two thoughts on that. One, Jesus broke rank.
No.
He's the master at it, man.
Right? He didn't consider the equality with God.
Something
right?
to be grasped.
Humility,
man.
He who knew no sin became sin. He left his riches so that we might become the riches, right? So, I mean, he did that. But also what you're talking about in these kinds of conversations, like getting out of your comfort zone and having these conversations with friends and families and speaking out. Like a lot of people, because of the way they think and the way they actually feel, are afraid to break that rank and speak out, because then it's going to cause disruption within their family. One guy says, I experienced that tonight at dinner with my family. You start speaking out on that stuff. Somebody you know and love close to you disagrees with you. Yeah. It gets really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And, we shy away from that kind of stuff because it is uncomfortable. It is messy, and it's interesting to me, man, that, Jesus did not shy away from mess, man. Like he plunged he was neck deep in it. And that connection, man, around having conversation. I mean, I've experienced this personally in my life recently. Me and my brother-in-law, who's I just consider him my brother. You know what I mean? Him and I are going to sit down and have a conversation like that coming up soon. Because that connection, man, is a big piece of what we're missing. Because as long as it's disconnected and I'm disconnected from Dion, then then I can't get my feelings involved. I can't get close to it because I'm isolated over here because I don't have to have connection. But when you make when you make purpose it to have those conversations, now you're opening up connection, man. And that the spirit in me to the spirit in you, that connection in between, and that's man, I believe that's so important, man.
Dion, you said something in your sermon this past Sunday that really stuck with me, and it shook me and caused me to further dive into my processing of myself and my heart. But I think I'm going to paraphrase, you can correct me with whatever it is, but it was something along the lines of, how are you different from the last time that a black person has lost their life? Ooh. How are you different? How have you changed? And it was then that I had to look at myself and go, I haven't. Yeah. I haven't changed at all.
Yeah, my life hasn't changed, my circle, my cadence. I don't think different, don't do anything different, don't say anything different, don't frequent different spots. I'm not reading anything different. I'm not consuming content any different. I mean, those are all real things that we have to force ourselves out of those cycles. And I'll be honest with you. The reason why I started saying that at Baltimore is because I didn't really make changes after Trayvon. You know what I mean? Like Trayvon came, things in between. Then here's Baltimore. And I'm like, man, I can't tell what have I done. And as a pastor, I'm like, well, I'm just going to preach a little bit harder. And it wasn't enough. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to preach harder on it. Or I'm going to say a little bit more. I'm going to do a series on difference, or, you know what I mean? Whatever, you know what I mean? Something real passive that yes, it needs to be done, but then it has to go a little bit further personally. And the reason why I said it wasn't because out of frustration to people who would be listening, is because I had to ask myself the same question.
Right.
And especially as being black male, what have I done different? Because there's a part of me that has acquired a level of success. I don't live in the same neighborhood I grew up in. You know, I can drive and eat and go and shop and buy wherever I want to, right? But that does then insulate me in some way to where I have to then ask myself, okay, so what are you doing different? And that's, to me, I had justified myself. I justified myself because I was in black skin. That means just because I'm black, then that means I don't have to do as much. Right. You know what I mean? Right. That's my thinking, you know. And then it required me to say, you know what, you unless I get engaged now, and the Holy Spirit did such a beautiful job with me this past week. He just unlocked some things in me. You know what I mean? He just was like, you know, because I was shaped. I went into law enforcement at 23, and at 40, I came out. So 17 years in there. And in all those years of me being shaped by this very right-wing environment, where we look for facts and we don't deal with feelings, and we deal with our communication is factual. Did you do these elements to this crime? Are you guilty of this on this day around about this time? You did these things, and that then you know. There's
no gray. It's boom boom.
It's very factual. It's very technical to deal with that, but we know that life is not that way, and so I came out, and there were some things in me that initially I had to ask myself, you know, why are you not as feeling that way about this particular thing? Bible believer, Holy Spirit filled, and still I had to come from that learning, that training of it's got to be facts first, and which is it's very good when you're in the process of high intensity, second by second change that you do factual and you adjust and what's important now, all that, I get it. But then you start trying to deal with people groups and pain and sorrow and trauma. You deal with
it's variable. Yeah. It's not just cut and dry. It's so variable.
Yeah. I couldn't switch it.
It's not robotic. It's human.
Yeah. I couldn't switch it. And in some way that I can see, and I'm not speaking for all white people or all black people, but I can see in some way how law enforcement communities or systems, governmental systems, or some even in white America could be, well, let me go to the facts, because then it prevents me from dealing with the feelings. You know, it prevents me from looking at a man give his last breath. It prevents me from thinking that's a bad thing, and I can look at the facts. It's the same thing when I looked at the video with Amy Cooper in Central Park.
Yeah.
This is the thing that blew me away. I mean, I don't know if someone else seen this, and it may have just been on the feed that I was on when I was looking at it, but there was a lot of people commenting on what she was doing to the dog and what she did not do to the man. So even in my mind, I'm getting frustrated by looking at the comments. It was like, oh my gosh, look at what she's doing to that dog. Look at what she's doing to that dog. Look at what she's done. I'm like, did we miss the whole video of what she just lied? I'm going to say that an African-American male did, you know what I mean? To me, then that makes him even less than the dog.
Right.
Because the comments are about the dog more than it is about the fact that this man's life really was being at stake with the lie and the theatrics of he's attacking me and my dogs.
And this is what when it comes to racism, I feel like there are many people, when they think the word racism, they go extreme. They go slavery, they go swastikas,
KKK,
they go
rebel flag,
they go way up here. And it's these mindsets that we have that we don't choose to think this way. People's first instinct wasn't to focus, like they didn't actively choose to focus on the dog first because of the way that they were raised and because of the systemic racism. Their mind already went there, and so people are so blind to see that. And so now I'm seeing lots more people have conversations and saying, hey, here are some things that kind of float under the table. We look at the top things. If there's a pyramid, we look at the top things that are KKK, the most extremes, but there's so many things.
Man, flies under the radar.
It's latent. It's latent. It's hidden beneath the surface.
And this is that heart stuff.
Yeah.
You know, what you're talking about right there is kind of what Just reminded me of something you said on Sunday where you're talking about the story of the Good Samaritan found in Scripture. Mm-hmm. And so there's a guy who had been attacked by thieves. He's laying on the road. Mm-hmm. A priest, whoever comes by, Levi come by. They ignore the guy. Then here comes a Samaritan who was kind of the outcast, the exile people group from the Jews. And he helps the man who was probably Jewish. So he associates with him in order to help him. But you brought up some good points about, a lot of times we miss the issue. The guy was a victim of a crime. Yeah. But then people want to start saying, well, why'd you travel alone at night? Why weren't you part of the caravan? Right. You know what we need to do? We need to put street lamps. Yeah. We need to pave the road and put some businesses. So, that, and we start focusing on the wrong things. Well, he should have complied.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
He should have said, yes, officer, and had some more respect.
And that's so, that's yeah, exactly. And that's so, man, like, what a dangerous thought process, like that we automatically go to, well, he should have, like I said, like, what did he do wrong? Like, why is that? Why is that even being brought up in the conversation? Well, what did he do wrong? What does it matter? Well,
let's play that out though. I mean, let's say that he was wrong, but the punishment doesn't meet the crime.
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
he passed judgment on that man right there on the street, dog.
Man, how many people have resisted arrest before? And, you know what I mean? Like how many people have tried to pass?
If I'm honest,
I mean, this is
I ran from the cops.
Forgery, $20 bill.
Right.
I mean, are we talking about? Let's say Ahmad was looking for something to steal. Do we trap him in the middle of the road and then shoot him?
Yeah.
I mean, we got to ask ourselves, are we trying to prevent ourselves from really having a real conversation about that? Because I want to look at the facts. And I'm telling you that in one way, law enforcement, that works. But in the other side, it hinders you from being, aware of that's real pain. And I'm not saying that I always got it right. What I will say is that when we don't see real pain and we want to stay in the facts place, it's easy to try to navigate their issue. It's what I said on Sunday. The lawyer asked a question seeking to do what? Justify himself. Mm-hmm. It's not about justice. It's about justifying himself. And those two things are what we're dealing with. We don't ever get into that justice part because I'm too busy trying to justify myself. Well, why is it okay for me to feel the way I feel? Why is it okay for me to think the way I think? Why don't I need to change because I'm all right? I understand who my neighbor is. He really didn't want to have the conversation on having a neighbor who is someone he may not like or he may not want to do life with. Only people that live in his zip code. Only people that visit the Target with him. Only people that go to his quick trip or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That we've got a very small circles that we run in. And anytime that I'm looking to make myself feel good about a particular situation or circumstance, I'm justifying myself in anything. You know what I mean? I get in an argument with my wife. Well, I'm going to hold this position because it makes me feel right. You know what I mean? And or a girlfriend or whoever, you know what I mean? I'm gonna hold this position but now we see it play out in prejudice, and it's because now I don't want to give justice because justice means that there may be some implications that are in my life that I'm implicated by.
Exactly. So So me and Chris were talking about this earlier, and I said people are afraid to admit a wrong when they think that admitting the wrong that somebody else committed implicates them in the wrongness. Mm-hmm. So basically, like a white person saying white people are racist. Well, you're not saying all white people are racist. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can say some white people are racist, but because you identify with the white race, in order for you to say that, you think that you're implicating yourself.
That's exactly. That's why we don't like.
And that's a really good point.
Black Lives Matter. The events ago became one of those things that I'm looking to justify myself. All lives matter. Blue lives matter. Right. Yellow lives matter. It's a justification move because if I have to say that, if I agree with it without that statement, then it means that I have not done something or I have done something. So you know what I mean? Like,
and go ahead.
Yeah, and when I used to hear that, especially with the incidences that came before, when I heard the word systemic racism, or that white people, white supremacy, things like that, man, it's something in me. It was like, it agitated me. I was mad that people would think that just like there's this white, because people that just are around and we're just trying to run everything and like, and man, I just remember getting super agitated. But as I begin to analyze and to observe things, man, like there are truths that come through, especially, and I wanted to ask you a question about, did you feel that the police force desensitized you in a way?
Yeah. Because I think to survive in law enforcement, and I say survive intentionally because I went in with the guys because I was a Christian. I was a pastor for a period of time in law enforcement, that I was invincible, that I would not be impacted or affected by the community, the culture. And I love my law enforcement brothers. I mean, I really do. And so that puts me in a funky position, because even as I share this now, I know how hard the job is. You know what I mean? I know how hard it is, and I know how that no one can really understand it unless you put on a uniform and you go to work with a bulletproof vest on. You don't really understand that. You don't understand to receive hate and frustration from people who you don't completely understand, and you don't really have all the time even to get to know. One of the things that I thought about after I preached that message, and I thought was unfair on my part, is that I didn't mention all the lives of law enforcement officers that have died, at the hands of other people, that we don't talk about that. And for me to be fair, right, even here in this culture, just two, while I was on the department, and one right after I retired, Brian Etheridge, I remember standing on the streets on South Rock Road here in Wichita, Kansas, after he was ambushed as he went to I think a larceny auto or something like that. You know what I mean? I remember where I was sitting at when I heard him through garbled speech on the radio saying, "I've been shot."
Oh my gosh.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So when we it's easy for us to say that it's just all or nothing, but what we did not do when he was shot, we didn't protest. What does that say about then people who work in law enforcement? You know what I mean? What do we say to them? Now there's people, yes, there was community groups who gave and who gave money to the family and helped the family, and there was all that going on. But we don't look at law enforcement and say, man, that hurt us too. Right? There's very few people that we see funerals, we have a little bit of coverage and then it goes away. Right? But when we look at law enforcement, we see Brian Etheridge, and that was in September 28th, 2009. I got the dates down here. And then the last one, Robert Coonsey, September 16th, 2018. Recently. Sunday, I'm coming from church, and I get a couple text messages, man, we've lost one. And I'm telling you that hurts me just as much as it hurts me seeing George Floyd with somebody's knee on his neck.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do I have space for both of those? As a community, do we have space to hold both of those to be true? Do we realize that Samaritans come in all shapes, sizes, and forms?
Wow.
That at some point in time, I'll be your Samaritan, and at some point in time, you'll be my Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That this isn't typecast. God, He reserves the right to put us in any position to where, in one moment, I may be this, I may be the one who fell among thieves, and in one moment, I hate to admit it, but I may be the priest.
Walking on by, turning a blind eye.
I may be the thief. I may wound you.
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, can I hold that idea, or I only see myself as a Samaritan, the good guy?
We don't like to write ourselves into the story that way.
Right. But here's what I think happens when it goes, so you have people that change their minds, and we've seen this in so many different things. Jason, when we came out of our past ministry experiences, we were on this side of the pendulum, and so we said, oh, well, this must not be right, so I got to swing so far over here, and I got to compensate. And so I think that people who are coming alive to this, or have been in the fight, for some time against racism, they were over here and they had space for this, and so they swing way over here. And I think it takes some time to course correct, but I think that's why that happens. Why people swing so far the other way and go, no, there isn't room for that. Yeah. You can't. There is not room to hold both of these lives, right? And so, if I have to analyze it, I mean, that's where I come in at. That's what I think that people are processing.
That's a good word.
But they don't want to be wrong because they were wrong in the past, and so it's almost like they got to make up for it in a sense.
That's good.
And what else happens? Because you're talking about there being space for both, and that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But what people like to do is they'll say, well, more black men get killed by police officers than police officers get killed by any community.
Right.
And then they start to weigh things.
Right.
Well, it's those facts that Dioane was talking about. Let's look at the facts.
Let's
get factual.
Yeah. What do the statistics say? I see it all over Facebook. People start busting out the stats. Well, here's what the stats say, and more black men.
I was busting out stats with you today.
On both sides, it's a validation of the stance that you hold. You know what I mean? It's statistics on both sides. We use those numbers, and yes, numbers are very, they can be accurate in some things, but we're talking about a macro. We're not talking about every, it's not an isolated thing. And so when we use those statistics, again, what Dioane was saying, it's the justification so that I don't have to be wrong. Well, look at the statistics, or look at the neighborhoods they live. Like we can paint it any way we want to paint it. That's the problem, because we always want to spin it to something that's not so personal, something that's not so real, something that's not so ugly, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that we don't have to deal with it, because we're perfectly fine living in our suburbs out here, so that we isolate people and allocate different, like look at just like Oaklawn or South City, or you know where you're at, you know what I mean? You can tell by the color of the people's skin. I know when I'm on the north side, you know what I mean? Which is a fact. Yeah. But we use that and not necessarily to weaponize it, but honestly as a defense,
It's to relieve ourselves of the burden of liability. We don't want to have to do anything about it. Right? We just want things to change, but we don't want to have to admit that there's wrongdoing, and we don't want to have to give any kind of action towards that change.
It's strange to me the lengths that we will go to justify our position, rather than the lengths that we will go to try to
empathize
with
a position,
and rather than be open, I'm gonna go to great lengths to make sure that my gates can remain shut, that I make sure that I lock my doors, that I make sure that I can pull a shotgun out of my closet. You know what I mean? Like we just go to great lengths to rally in our comfort, and to make sure that that we're not being inconvenienced, that we're not being
self-preservation.
Exactly.
And Jason and I were talking earlier. He hit me up, and we kind of had a podcast before the podcast.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
It happens all the time.
Every dang time.
But you asked me a very pointed question that stopped me in my tracks. You said, "What do you want to happen?"
Yeah,
I think you said. You asked me, "What do you want to happen?" People are becoming woke or whatever, or informed, whatever phrase you want to use.
Stay woke, fam.
What do you want to happen? It stopped me. I had to think about it for a minute. But then when it hit me. And I was like, this is what I want people to feel empathy. Like, I am seeing so much lack of that on social media. And this is the whole, and I'm talking entry level. If we're talking first step, like I think that's the first step that people need to experience is that empathy. Because without that, empathy causes you to do self-examination, and it causes you to, first look outward, but then you look inward. I feel like because of those interactions, and we see Jesus when he comes into contact, empathizing with people.
Is indifference the opposite of empathy? Because I've heard that indifference is the opposite of love. You just don't care. That's even worse than hate, because there's still passion behind hate. Indifference is nothing.
That's lukewarm.
Yeah, indifference is such a tricky thing. I can't speak to in absolutes about that.
Sure,
but I will say that
I like it.
I will say that indifference to me is. It's you're dying of cancer and you don't know it. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm dying, but I don't know it. When I'm angry or I'm joyful, I've got some sense of something. You know what I mean? But indifference is such a sneaky killer. It's like, dying of carbon monoxide or something. You know what I mean? It's like you're
not aware.
Yeah, I'm not even aware. Next thing you know, I don't wake up. It's got that type of thing to it, and it lies right there beneath the surface, and people don't see it. So what I think personally about that is that when we see people who are dealing with prejudice, it often manifests itself in that indifference. I'm not prejudiced because I don't have a hate for you. Yes. But I don't care about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense what I'm saying? And it's like, well, where do I put that? And so I feel justified in that, but anytime I think that you have intrinsically less value than me, or you're not even worth worrying about, I set myself up for indifference. That indifference then leads me to injustice. to where it doesn't matter about your pain because I don't really matter. You don't matter
because you're inferior.
Yeah.
And I feel like when we address the topic of systemic racism, it's kind of an insidious thing, right? That where we have made people inferior, and when you make people inferior, and so that's the reason why I asked you about the desensitization, because I know that when I was in the military, they especially in a combat MOS, you use slurs for Middle Eastern people, because it makes them inferior. It makes it easier for you to disassociate.
Makes it easier to do my job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Disassociate with the humanity.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so we're talking about empathy, and I'm talking to Christopher about this, and I'm just saying it's hard for people to experience empathy when they're not close to the situation.
When it's not personal.
So when it's not personal.
Yeah.
So it's a lot harder
Yeah.
for a white or Hispanic or an Asian or whatever to empathize fully with watching the unjust death, execution, whatever, of a murder of a black man, because you're so far separated. This morning I woke up and I realized that there had been rioting and gunshots and police rocks and bullets and all that stuff from rioting in the north side of Wichita. I woke up, I started reading some of that stuff, and people that I know and that I've loved, I've been in this part of the city for 10 years, people that I know and love, friends, were up late, didn't sleep, were afraid, their kids were afraid, and so being under a threat of whatever they were afraid of, it hit me right in the empathy center. And for the first time, I actually gave a crap about what was happening in my backyard.
Come on, man.
Because it hit home close. And it's very difficult for people who are so far removed from the situation to actually have empathy for it.
Look at COVID. New York, people are aware of it. Go to Kansas, the people are over exaggerating it.
Well, dude, I'll even tell you this today. So there was a peaceful protest that happened in Derby, and so I live in Derby. I mean, it's a overly white community, the whitest community I've ever lived in. So,
it's Casey's from Mulvane.
Yeah, Casey's from Mulvane. So
I'm not from Mulvane.
Oh, you're not? Where are you
You're
from?
not from the vein.
That's not my side. No,
I don't claim that's.
He doesn't want to claim Mulvane.
No, I grew up in Derby. No.
Yeah,
Okay.
Right.
So
It's
there
Beaver.
was a-
It's
there was
Beaver
a-
Cleaver for sure, man.
there was a peaceful protest that happened, and I saw in so many Facebook comments, "Get that out of here."
Come on, man.
Get that away from here.
Yeah.
And it's because of the discomfort, and it's because people don't want to see it, and because if they see it, they have to address it, they have to form an opinion, they have to do something about it.
Or listen, truth is a funny thing. To tell the truth, to be a truth teller means that you're not going to be liked by anybody. You know what I mean? You tell the truth too much and you'll find yourself without friends. You know what I mean? So,
right.
So
yeah.
you look at when people are they're so uncomfortable where they have to self-disclose their position to where like, I don't like that. Well, when it wasn't in Derby, I didn't have to even say anything because I could go on my porch, turn on my TV, flip channels, skip the news media, don't look at my phone, watch Netflix, whatever. But then when I got to drive down the street and I see kids and I see white kids with signs saying Black Lives Matter, it messes with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I mean, this is real conversation that we have to be able to have a true conversation, and truth tellers normally get killed. Look at Jesus.
Yep.
Look at Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Truth tellers get killed. You're not going to be a truth teller for long because you start costing people money. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's money. You know what I mean? I'll say this: truth is so powerful that Jesus only gives us a command to speak the truth in love, because it's so powerful. You can weaponize it.
You can weaponize it, right? Yeah,
it's hard. And we, even now, as we both are dealing with pain, many of us are dealing with pain. I don't say it. Many of us are dealing with pain and discomfort, that we want to tell the truth, and I know that telling the truth has to be done in a way that it can be received, because to tell the truth and it weaponizes, it doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah, people don't receive that.
It's the right
they
thing, but from the
don't.
wrong place.
They don't.
That's good.
Yeah. So I think that it requires a level of sobriety, even in the midst of this adversity, to be able to accurately explain why this is important and why now and why we need to address it, because we've got too many racist comments that are dog whistles. And so for those of you who may know what I mean by that, there's political phrases that lets me know that you're with me.
Right. They let you know what side you stand on. Without me saying that I'm a white nationalist, or that I want things to go back to the way they were when there was more of me than it was of them. And when I could distance myself without having to see them or deal with them. And I'm talking about on both sides of it. Yeah.
But I'm saying specifically for you to say that we're going to be tough on crime. That's dog whistle. You know what I mean? For saying that we're going to over police marginalized and poor communities of color so that they'll stay in their place and you can be free to do what you want to do in your area, your side of town.
Damn, man.
Redlining, where we won't allow you to move into certain neighborhoods. You know what I mean? Well, we'll do neighborhood covens now. I mean, we've got to be careful that we don't, if we're not, our eyes aren't open to it. There's a lot of things that go on that we don't suspect are really rooted in prejudice. And we have these dog whistle phrases that, because I got people that I used to work with that they would always tell a story by telling what the race of the person was prior to telling any details. And I started asking, so what was that information for? So that I would come to some conclusion about them, that I would put them in a group or a box, because, that black person almost cut me off. Well, what, I don't mind.
So that you can paint the narrative.
Yeah. I don't mind that you're mad because someone cut you off or almost hit you or sideswiped you. But if you're telling me because it was an Asian, I don't know, this Asian lady was at the store today and she wanted to help me. But no, what you're doing is you're letting me know that I should draw something from this that you don't have to really say because I give their ethnicity.
Yeah, there's blanks that are there that they want you to fill in.
Come on, man.
Right.
This is real talk. You know what I mean? And we got to, if we don't have conversations about holding both space true, then what's another truth? That we have been feeding our children disobedience for so long, and we're shocked that we raise anarchists. Why are we shocked? Why are we shocked that we've got people that we've told don't listen to anybody in authority? Mm-hmm. We've told them that.
Yeah.
We've demonstrated it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's my right to do whatever. I'm free to do whatever I want to do. And I don't have to submit to any authority. I don't have to worry about anybody else. And then when we see people acting out and showing out, we're blown away by it.
Why? But why are they doing this?
Because we fed it to them. We fed it to them.
Yep.
We fed it. And I'm saying all colors. We fed it to them. And so now we got teachers right now who hate to see certain people or certain kids or in certain communities because we fed to them. Don't be disobedient. But at the same time, as school teachers and communities, we've ignored that kids are going to school hungry. We've ignored that kids are being molested and then sent to school. Yeah. Being beat, not sleeping at night, then sent to school. Yeah. Can I hold both of those to be true?
Right.
Right? Yeah. That they're both true. And it takes courage to say both of them and not just say the one that makes you feel good. So when we're talking about being shut in COVID, I more often than not, I've thought about all the kids whose school was a reprieve for them.
Man.
Ouch. And now they're at home with predators as parents.
Dang, dude.
Going hungry, living in fear all day
all day without a break.
Man.
Wow.
So when we see that's a system that has its knee on the neck of young people, right? Because we haven't really addressed that. And I'm not saying that every governmental agency needs to address everything in houses, because I know that's an impossibility. Yeah. But as the church, we have a responsibility to say something, to tell the truth in love. And the truth is, you know what? I'm guilty of that. And I'm guilty of that. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm guilty of both those. Or, you know what? I agree with that, but I also agree with this. Or I don't agree with that. To be able to hold that space. Because
why are people so afraid of admitting guilt, though? Because
we like to be right, man.
We like to be right.
I like to be right.
And I don't know. I see a lot of stuff on Facebook, obviously. I don't say everything I think. But, I think about just the level of hypocrisy that exists. Yeah. And every time that I say that, I have to caveat that there are places in my life where I am a hypocrite, that I don't do what I say I believe or think or value. Mm-hmm. But I realize that is an issue. Mm-hmm. And so there's something about this admission of guilt where there's a major fear behind admitting guilt. So let me put one out there, and I'd like to open this up for conversation. I'm guilty of wanting to respond all lives matter when people say Black Lives Matter. Right. I've been guilty of that. I've never like posted that or anything like that or really explained that to anybody. But I'm like, oh, Black Lives Matter, especially when the movement was birthed. I was like, get that out of my face.
Talk to me. Yeah.
Right. But now, from a logical standpoint and from an empathetic standpoint, I like to have empathy for the people group that's crying out and rallying that they matter. Right? They want solidarity. They want empathy. They want people to say, yes, you matter, and then do something about it. And if I can make the statement, all lives matter, I can also make the statement, Black Lives matter, because Black lives are part of
all lives.
All lives. And so at any point in time, I can break down that statement into its pieces and make a factual statement based on those broken pieces. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Asian lives matter. They do. Man. But if my Black brothers are hurting and they're rallying behind a cry, and I want to empathize with that, I can believe in my heart that all lives matter. That can be my values, my Christian, Judeo, white, Western evangelical, church, Jesus-loving, Bible-touting beliefs, and I can still say that Black lives matter because it's true.
Right.
But it's dismissive.
Right.
Yeah, it's dismissive. And
to say all lives matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
To say, no, we're talking about Black men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, is it okay for me to talk about them, to care about them and not, oh, well, let me care about everybody because I don't want to actually say that it was a Samaritan that helped me. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to identify the Samaritan. If you continue to read in Luke chapter 10, at the very end of it, you'll see where Jesus says, well, who showed compassion? And the attorney, being an attorney, he's like, the one who showed the most compassion, mercy. Yeah. He won't say a Samaritan.
He won't say Samaritan.
He won't even say a Samaritan.
He wouldn't even say his name. Huh?
This is the
that's crazy.
This is the model that we see where we won't go into saying that Black men matter. I mean, very specific.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that is hard because then in some ways, I think, I'm not going to say it's hard for me, but I can see how it's hard for people to say that because it seems exclusionary to everybody else. And that in our best selves, we want people to be included.
Everybody. Right.
Yeah, so I was even having a conversation with someone, and I was taking some, not some big jabs, but I had mentioned, is it possible that the reason that all lives matter is a statement that you use is because it doesn't feel good to not be included, and you want to be included, but guess there's a whole other people group that hasn't been included. They haven't been invited to play. Right. They've been told that their skin color is different. I mean, they've been all of this stuff. And so not being included and not being treated fairly feels wrong. Man. And that's something that people don't want to wrestle with.
I agree with you, Chris. And I'll say this from a personal place. When God set me free this week in ways I just hadn't been, it's because he just simply said, do you need to see the facts before you can care? He said it to me. Right. And that's why I shared it with you guys, because obviously you preach messages that it has to sit with you before you can share with anybody else. So I was getting whooped. And a lot of that is because, I've got a love for both groups. I listen to me. I could not be sitting here right now today without the help of some white teachers and coaches that were very instrumental in keeping me out of trouble, giving me the advantages that I could not afford myself. I can't ignore them. I can't deny them. I just can't. And I know that there's other people who understand this, what I'm saying, because I don't want to do a blanket statement, and people want you to do a blanket statement. Right. And I don't want to do a blanket statement. I want to be very specific, and I want to be able to own that space. Yeah. But I can't ignore and say that all white people have been devils to me. You know what I mean? But nor can I say that all cops are good. But nor can I say that all Black deaths at the hands of officers is wrong. I can't say that either. That's a hard truth. You know what I mean? So what we have to do is be like, well, who's going to tell the truth? And you don't make many friends doing that. Yeah. But telling the truth is what we need. We need to have the conversation where someone is given space to tell the truth. And it's hard to do that because we take sound bites and, oh my goodness, I can't. Or listen, I'm at the point in my life where the Lord was telling me, he's like, okay, so you're 40 something years old. I won't tell you exactly how old I am, but you're 40 something years old. He said
40, just 40 exactly.
40 something. You know what I mean? He said that when are you going to be counted? This is what the Lord told me. And it sounds like it'd be crazy because I'm saying like, I'm a pastor. I got this resume, I got all this stuff. He says, no, you're not being counted. You're everybody's safe black friend.
Ooh.
Ooh. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes,
absolutely.
I mean, you're that safe black friend that I got, and my pastor, he's very safe. And Jesus was like, listen, not that you can keep your black card. He said, but anybody who's my disciple, they by nature are not going to be safe.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's, listen, I'm good, but I'm not safe.
I'm good, but I'm not safe.
Yeah. And we have to be that. And I'm saying that for me, that I had to come to a place where like, be good, but you can't be safe. You can't be a pastor who says that you hear from God and you follow the tenets and preachings of Jesus and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Right.
And so me even saying some of these things is very risque. It's very dangerous because there's some people who be like, if I only heard this part of the message or this part of the podcast, I can't get down with him no more.
Yeah,
and that's okay
because they're just looking for one thing to disqualify anything you're saying, man.
Well, because they want me to identify with them, and I get that. They want me to someone stand up for me, someone say something, someone articulate it, so that you got a platform. I don't say it, so someone can hear it, and I get that because we got to continue to speak for Floyd. We got blood speaks.
Cool.
It has, and it always will. If you go all the way back to Cain and Abel, blood spoke then with Abel, and blood has been speaking from the cross, and blood will continue to speak from the streets, because we cannot forget these ills and the woes of this community. We cannot. And I don't want to be the type of people who try to silence the blood of Floyd or Ahmaud or somebody else because it makes me uncomfortable to hear their cries.
Man. Gosh darn. Man, dude.
So I feel like the question is like, what's next? Because I mean, this is the question that I asked Christopher. What do you want to happen? And he says, I want people to have empathy. Well,
as an entry level.
Sure, as an entry level. But then how do you mass, like foster empathy? And
I wanted to talk to Dioane about this because this is my favorite thing that he said on Sunday was that you cannot legislate love.
No.
And when I look at that, I look at a couple of things. It's interesting.
I got a lot of comments coming up on my ton of comments.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting to me drawing kind of the comparison of of what was happening in Jerusalem when Jesus died.
Yeah.
There was civil unrest. Mm-hmm. There was a group of people that was oppressed by the dominance hierarchy.
Right.
And they thought, at least in the way that I understand it, the Jews thought that utopia, that freedom, will come through the perfect state.
The
state of the people. But when Jesus came, so much so that when he came, they wanted to make him king.
That's good.
Right. And he, rather than, it wasn't about the state. He did it on an individual level. Right. And so what I think, when I think about, okay, well, what do we do? And especially what you said, man, gosh, I don't know why that hit me. So you cannot legislate love unless God legislates that on your heart, dude. Yeah. I will write my law on their heart. Yep. And the law is love, And so I'm thinking about a couple things when it comes to that is, we think that for some reason, when we're looking at the pyramid here, the hierarchy, the higher ups, that the people that can make those laws will make the laws and then it will trickle down. Well, what I saw Jesus do was the masses on the bottom of the pyramid, that was an individual thing, and person to person, connection to connection, that will rise up to the top. And I don't think it's a trickle down thing. I think it's a rise up to the top because
grassroots thing.
Because individual to individual, like you were saying, with just having a conversation with somebody, and another thing that I was thinking about was like love. Man, we say so much, the world needs more love. The world, we need to pray for more love, right? But what I understand of love is that love is a fruit of the Spirit. And so when we pray for those things distinctively, what we're really saying and what we should really be praying for is more of Christ, because he's the vine. Because if you want more of the fruit, kindness, peace, patience, love, if you want more fruit, you got to have more branches. We have to have more branches, people introduced to that person through us individually and our connection individually to each other, because that's where things change. Then we need more branches. You want more fruit? You want, or do you want the same branches bearing more fruit, or do you want more branches to start bearing more fruit?
Right,
we need more grafting into Christ, man. We need more him, man. And that's what I was saying today, man. I was just really moved, man, because I was having this vision of the fat, juicy vine, man. That's Jesus.
Fat, juicy vine.
And I was having this vision, and my heart broke for George. My heart broke for everything. And that's why I said, God, help us, man. Because we need more him, man.
Here's the tension I experience with that, and I think I talked a little bit about this with you on the phone. Is I hear that and I agree with that wholeheartedly. I feel though like that statement when it's made, it's a yes, absolutely 100%. But then there's also this flip side that it kind of feels like it says we just got to wait for that.
No,
and I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that.
Right.
But the tension that I face then is like, what then? Yes, I want to usher that in. I want to be a vine that comes off of the fat, juicy vine. But then also, what are the other things that I can do outside of that? And I'm not saying that you're going against that.
I'm with you.
But that's the tension that I experience of like, but then what else can I do here and now that is not?
It's easy to play that too. It's easy. Oh, well, we just need more Jesus. You know what I mean?
And I knew that's not what you were saying.
Yeah. And what I was saying there was coming from a deep place of, okay, now I want to participate, being the body, being Christ to somebody else, rather than just saying, oh, well, I'm going to pray I'm going to wait in passivity. You know what I mean? And be passive in my prayer.
It's almost like that activated you.
Well, God's got it. God's in control. No, man, he wants us to do something about it because we are the hands and feet of Jesus. And that body connected, that body unified is what's going to bring the change. And see, what we have here is a divide, man. It's you can see it, man. From the house divided will not stand. Yeah. Black brothers to white brothers to Asian brothers to brown brothers. It doesn't matter. If we're divided, we can't get anything done. And that connection to each other and being Christ to each other, just like what he was talking about with the dinners of disagreement, that concept that he was talking about. He said he's going to have a dinner every night with somebody he disagrees with, somebody from a different creed, somebody from a different race, somebody from a red or blue. It doesn't matter, right. But that connection and those conversations that we have is going to start that, man.
Yeah, I think the church though too. We're guilty of the paralysis of prayer. We'll just say that I'm going to pray, and we do that, but we're supposed to pray as we go, as we do.
Right.
You know what I mean? We have done prayer as it's I'm going to be sitting and not doing anything until no.
It's been a checklist.
We've got to we got to quit. And some of that too is, obviously is just a cop out when we don't know what to do. Right. And I get that. I'm not going to experiment. I'm just going to pray. Because I don't, it's risky and I don't want to make a mistake. I'm not going to talk to black people. I'm not going to talk to white people. I'm not going to talk to police officers. I'm not going to talk to legislatures because I don't want to make a mistake or come across wrong or mess up. I'd rather play it safe. I'd rather be right, but be right by myself, or be right and be siloed. And if we don't have the grace to allow people to have conversations with each other, that I may make a mistake in saying, whether you're offended by saying black or African American. We said that this just before we started the podcast, Chris.
I asked.
You asked, well, which one should I say, black or African American? Now, I want you to think about that. In a place where I don't feel safe and I want to have a conversation with somebody, I don't know exactly how to address the situation, and it leaves me, less than potent. I'm not really being authentic because I'm trying to juggle all these places to where I don't want to offend. I'm so worried. And that's why I'm saying about having dinner. I'm talking about having, and someone you may dismiss that as too simple. No. This is risky. Mm-hmm. I'm bringing people into my house. One, I was told by my grandma not to bring people over. So I'm always wrestling against that. My grandma was like, you don't need to bring nobody in this house. And so I'm always struggling with that. but even then to have people in my house that I don't agree with. That's a whole nother thing. You know what I mean? And Jesus is the master of it.
Yeah, you said that you took that from Jesus' playbook.
Man, I'm just using his playbook.
Right.
He had dinner so much so that people hated him for having dinner with people that they didn't agree with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Not even that they were
Jesus,
invited.
why you got to bring them around here?
Yeah, they weren't even at the table. They weren't even in the room, but he's going over so-and-so's house. How dare him? I mean, let's be honest. We're not going to make any progress if we're not willing to have conversations with people that we don't necessarily agree with, that I would not consider my neighbor. You know what I mean? I got to have those conversations. I got to sit and listen to your pain. I want to hear your story. I want to know why you're really scared of black people. I want you to tell me that. Well, I got jumped when I was 12 years old one day walking home from school. Yeah. And ever since then, I've been afraid of black people. Yeah. Or you know what? My grandma told me about time she got raped by somebody, and all I can remember her talking about is that it was somebody that was black. Yeah. Let's have that conversation. Yeah. I want to have the conversation. Tell me why you're afraid of me.
You're talking about going into the closets.
Oh my goodness,
looking at the monsters.
Real life talk.
And bringing them out.
Bring it out. Now here's a problem though. In our community, law enforcement officers cannot do that. Now why not? Because the badge covers in some ways, because if I tell you that I have a bias, then it undoes all the work that I've ever done that may have been good or right, because I can't tell you that I have a bias, because then it may disqualify me from being considered a peacekeeper or law enforcement officer. Even though we know that their judgment, their biases, their prejudice are not suspended when they put on the uniform. Right. We oftentimes we know that, but I cannot put anything down that would be memorialized or on paper to say
can't bring facts.
Well, we need to look no further than what happened with OJ, right? As soon as we find out that Furman had said some things, used racial slurs, all the things he touched were no good.
Right.
Man.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And that sends a message to law enforcement officers. No, I can't say any of that. So are we going to get accurate data and information from law enforcement officers? No. And then maybe not even from officers that have retired like myself, because if someone then hears and says, I knew that dude was dirty. I knew she was, then we go back and we undo that. So what I'm saying, the system is set up to keep people entrenched. It's not to be authentic. And I'll tell you the truth. One thing I love about Dr. King is that Dr. King marched in the streets. He was jailed wrongly. But then at the same time, when it was time to write legislation, he was in the room when things were being signed. We have to make sure that we don't just find ourselves marching, but we never actually have pen in hand and are signing legislation to change things. That's a big difference between people who I'm frustrated, I'm sad, I'm mad. And I pray that there's people, I'm right now in the process of working with meetings with people to talk about law enforcement reform. Wow. How do we move from just saying I'm mad about it and I'm frustrated? Then how do I put that energy and effort into the next step? We got to start being in rooms when people are signing legislation into place to make change at the highest levels. That's the only way. Because Dr. King would not be okay with just saying that we marched and it really went good, we marched well, but without actually having voter rights laws passed, without actually having laws put on the books. Even though they weren't perfectly done and adhered to, but somebody had to put some laws on the books. Yeah. And we cannot go back and say Floyd died, Eric Garner died, and they both were saying the same thing, I can't breathe. We shot down and beat up the NFL because we didn't like Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. And now all those things become chic to some groups that before would not identify with. Wow. And that maybe seem cool to some people, where we've got photo ops and police officers taking knees and groups taking knees, and then we stand up and we shake hands and love and hug. But that's not enough. Right. That's a start. But until we move on the next level and we start not only voting, but we start helping write laws to make change, it matters not. Yeah. We're just setting ourselves up for another cycle. Does that make sense?
Right. It's like you can get in a car and start the car, but if you don't ever pull out of the parking lot, you're not going anywhere.
You got
and I feel like right now it's to the point where it's like, man, we got our foot on the gas pedal and we need to get moving. I think one of the questions that I have a lot of friends, I see them asking, is trying to figure out, what can I do outside of, marching, attending this protest, posting and sharing my stance? Because I do think that all of those things are good things. It lets people know where you stand. It presents opportunities for conversations within your family. Right. But after that, people are wondering.
But then what?
But then what?
Right.
Because that still to me seems like a checklist. Oh, well, I'm going to go on Instagram and I'm going to black out my Instagram. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That's a checklist,
right?
To me, you know what I mean? And like you said, like he's getting in a room, and that comes through connection, like making those connections and talking about it. Not, and I'm certainly, again, I'm not saying don't do those things, but I'm saying make sure that it's not a checklist that you're going by to make sure that you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
Yeah, and I think that for some people, I mean, they may experience that. Right. I think the people that I'm thinking of, they know that it's an entry point, and they go, what's next? Because I know, I mean, and this is how I feel. I'm now holding on to the question that you asked yourself: how am I going to be different?
Right.
And man, let's hope that we don't find ourselves here in another month or in 2 months. We might, but if we do, I don't want to be the same. I want to have taken steps, and not and that's not to put myself on a pedestal or make me feel better, like, oh, I advanced a little bit since the last time. But there needs to be some of that. Yeah. And we talk about this on the podcast all the time. If you look back from where you were 3 years ago, just in your walk with Jesus, and if you have not advanced, what are you doing?
Right.
If you're the same person that you were, then this is the same thing.
I was perfect then. I'm perfect now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so what's even on a so we're talking about individual scale. I mean, we obviously all can't get in rooms to make legislation, but like on a practical scale, what can I do in the streets? You know what I mean? Or just like go into the store, and how do I get involved like that on an individual level with people?
It'd be easy for me to say, like, look at a list of nonprofits in your area and go volunteer. I think those are good things. But I'm going to go back to a simple thing, and that's the dinner. Jesus took a very complex idea of communion, of relationship with him, new covenant, and he brought it down to a piece of bread and a piece of and wine. Wow. Do you see what I'm saying? He brings the more. Dang. We've got to bring it down to something that where, the apostles, the church grew through fellowship, breaking the bread, keeping the apostles' doctrine and breaking bread. It's relational. And until I get close, half dead bodies on the sides of streets don't matter to me. Dead bodies don't matter. I can walk right over them, step over them, and keep moving. We've got to get close. And so I'm saying that do those things, do it. But at the same time, how about you have dinner with somebody that you don't really necessarily know? You don't understand their perspective. You don't know a lot about them. Matter of fact, they may get on your nerves, but you purposely have a dinner so that you can sit down and say, you're worth me breaking bread with. Yeah. I may not eat with you ever again. I don't say that you don't have to make someone your lifelong buddy.
Right.
But I think those experiences, I've heard it said this before, that a believer with an experience is stronger than an infidel with an argument.
Wow.
And an infidel, obviously, a non-believer, a Gentile. So when you have that experience, I may not be able to articulate it, but I cannot deny my experience.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I may not be able to go into the scripture and see why this worked, but I cannot deny what I felt in my heart when I heard their story. You know what I mean? That's to me is what I think we need to start. Because if we get too complicated, just like Jesus knew, I can't make this complicated because they won't do it. Or they'll make the complication a religion to itself.
Yes.
Right. You know what I mean?
Darn.
Then we become Ephesians chapter 2, forget that. Make it hard so I can impress somebody. Dang. You know what I mean? Like, but if we make it simple and say, you know what, why don't you just next week put somebody on your schedule? You call them tonight and say, hey man, I've been convicted. I've marched, I've protested, I've held signs, I've took knees. I've read books, listened to podcasts, I posted. I've retweeted. I've done all that. I still don't feel satisfied because that's where I think people are at.
Right. Yeah.
I've done that, but I still don't feel satisfied.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. What else am I going to do? Well, I'm asking you to have tough conversations with people that you don't agree with. Or maybe even then having a conversation with people you normally agree with, but on a topic that you disagree with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we don't do that, then I think we're missing the biggest real turnaround. It's a grassroots level. It then moves up systemically because I believe that the man who fell among thieves and was naked, listen to me, he was stripped naked and breathing shallow, face down in the dirt. Mm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. People walk by him. And I can't believe that he got healed whole and well and then went back and talked bad about Samaritans. I just don't think he could be the same person.
Right.
And I don't know what rooms he
experience.
went into. And I don't know how many kids he had, what his wife thought or his grandkids thought, or how he may have been able to impact it. But I know that we saw one, but I know that every time we see one, there's so many more people who are connected to them.
Right. There's a ripple effect.
It's a ripple. So when I see one Eric Garner. I see one George Floyd. I see one conversation, one dinner. I know that there's so many more people who are connected to them. Right. That were hurting and deeply in pain because of what they saw on the streets.
Yeah.
And that's why even now we are in pain, because it just can't stay on the streets of Minnesota.
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It then is in my heart. And so then it causes me to deploy myself differently when I go into boardrooms, when I have access to at tables that other people may not have access to. I've been changed fundamentally because I cannot say that Black lives don't matter. Right. You know what I mean? I've been changed fundamentally because I could say that we need proper policing. Yeah. And it's good for us to have police. Right. That are healthy and strong. Right. You know what I mean? It's good for us to spend extra money on healthcare and systemic issues that go on with education. It's good for me to be able to say, because then when I go into rooms, I can ignore kids who are in elementary schools that are dilapidated and got poor classrooms and broken textbooks, because I don't go into those schools. Right. Yeah. And I'm challenging myself because my kids are no longer in elementary schools. You know the last time I was in elementary school? I mean, it's been forever. Yeah. But until I go in purposely to read to kids, to see what's going on in them, to see the demographics that are going on in the school. Do you know that in 2014 was the very first year that a majority of elementary age students were non-white in the United States in its entire existence? Whoa. Wow. 2014. Dang. Was the very first year that out of all students enrolled in elementary school across the country, the scales had tipped to where we had more minorities in those rooms, not just in the schools, but just overall. Overall. Yeah. So what we're saying is that we're at a place to where we're not going to go back to some things.
Would you say
so
that's
we're not
progress?
Making things great again. We're changing. It's different. Mm-hmm. Right. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right. Would you say that that's progress though?
Well, I think it's progress. I think it's what I don't want to make it God's plan to have people who, ethnicity and mixed race and to be more than white. I'm saying that it is change. And we know ultimately that God is orchestrated, and we can't deny that. I don't want to sit around and say that we should be expecting a white lash because people are afraid of change. But can I tell you what we're experiencing right now with people who are indifferent and don't care about Black people and still want status quo to stay the same thing? We're watching people who've got now another type of knee is on a group of people's neck, and they don't necessarily like the feel of that. Yeah. Well, what happens when people of color become the majority? When they get into roles of power and influence, will they exact revenge on me? Mm-hmm. Will I get the big payback now? What happens when we think people who are conservative are the best lovers of the country. They fly the flag the highest. Yeah. Right. But what I'm saying is what you're saying is you're seeing a death of some things, and racism will die hard. And it won't be an easy death.
And that's what I talked to Jason about as well, is that before I was driving over here, I was thinking in my mind, and I just want to ask you the same question. I was thinking, okay, so as we progress from the civil rights movement, do you think, and although I think a lot of issues in our life, not just racism or, change or anything like that, we want the end result without progress. Right. And I think that we want it to happen right now. And I'm wondering, do you think that as we progress further and further from the civil rights movement, do you think that racism will eventually die out? Because, or is that just kind of like just an inherent thing right there in the system?
I'm going to tell you why it won't. Prejudice, it won't die out in general, because the scripture says the poor you'll have with you always. Right. As long as we're going to have poor people, we'll have prejudice. As long as we have poor people, we'll have racism. Because it'll be, well, you can't stamp those things out, and so there will always be someone who wants to position themselves above someone else, because that's a condition of the heart. You can't put enough food in the streets to prevent people from being prejudiced and bigoted. You can't build enough apartments and put enough beds out to put people in to sleep in to still prevent people from saying that's my neighborhood, that's their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
You just can't do it. But here's the thing. Don't let that discourage you, because I know that some of you hear that and you say, well, that means I shouldn't fight. No. I'm not saying that. I just want you to realize that this is a long game.
Right.
That you got to be playing for the long game.
Yes.
You got to be thinking of a lifetime of fighting against this.
Ooh.
Right? You got to think that I'm going to die, and my hope is that I leave the world in a better place than it was when I first came into it. I'm playing the long game, and then that I've given enough to those who followed in behind me that they would play it even better, because I know I won't ever stamp it out, but I cannot relegate myself to not trying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just impossible for me not to do something. I gotta know that.
It's got to be generational, right? Because you think about how long ago the Emancipation Proclamation was signed.
Oh yeah,
it's been multiple generations.
Yeah,
and there's still systemic issues, and there's still an issue in the heart of humans, and that's really what it boils down to.
Man,
I think this is the last thing I have to say about any of this tonight, but really what you're talking about is getting face to face with people. And hearing their story and hearing their human experience, and realizing that on a fundamental level, we are all the same. We all experience this world in a certain way, and we've all experienced pain and trauma and injustice and fear and hopelessness and doubt and concern and struggle and strife and all of the negative human emotions. We have all experienced that one way or another. Your outrage might have been birthed by watching your black brothers and sisters have a knee on their neck under the injustice of a system that's not for them, that's against them. And I might have experienced some other injustice that maybe you don't think is injustice, and maybe I don't think yours is injustice.
Yeah.
But if we can articulate those experiences in a way that we realize, hey, we have experienced some of the same things. And again, what happens is people trying to elevate. Well, what you experienced isn't as bad as what I experienced. Can we just say that we've all experienced bad things?
Yeah.
And the pain that I've experienced, would I ever wish that on anybody? Absolutely not. You know the pain of hurt. You know the pain of abandonment. You know the pain of loss. You know the pain of grief. You know the pain of hopelessness. And the circumstances that brought about those pains may not be the same for us, but I know what that pain is like, and it sucks. Oh, you're saying you experienced that same pain? I've heard your story, and you've articulated in a way that made me say, oh yeah, maybe we've been through some of the same things. That's huge progress, because we tend to push people away thinking that their experience isn't the same as ours. Well, they've got it worse, or I've got it worse, or whatever. But if we can just connect on the foundational human level, I think that's obviously what Jesus did. He came and he humanized everybody.
But can we even go a step further with that? What if I don't have any of those things? Can I still care?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, like, let's say I don't have anything that we identify with. Your skin color doesn't look like mine, and I don't come from the same neighborhood, same background, upbringing, and I don't have some of the same pain or trauma. But can I still care?
Can you still care?
Yeah. And what I'm saying is that black folks are tired of being walked by.
Yeah.
Tired of being walked over. Tired of having knee sat on. Tired of it. That's what you're seeing. And I think others are standing with us in that, which I'm grateful for.
Absolutely.
But there's only so many times that the priest and the Levite can walk by before you start thinking to yourself, like, what's wrong with this situation here?
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think that we've got some work to do. But can I put this out there, Pastor Jason, about police reform?
Yeah.
I want to do this. There's a couple things that I think, and by all means, this is not an exhaustive list for those who may be listening online, but I think we need to start having this conversation, because if we just talk about this and we don't go to the next level, I think that we miss it.
Yeah, it's a miss.
Right, it's a miss. And so just from my 17 years of law enforcement, I know that these are some things that I've seen. One, I think that it needs to be mandatory from a national level that law enforcement officers have mandatory sabbaticals. That they cannot continually police nonstop without taking breaks. And this is outside of vacation, outside of sick time, that for what I believe, if we were to look at some of the demographics and the details of these overuses of force, I guarantee you it's for officers. A majority of the officers have been on the department long periods of time or longer periods of time. And they don't do well under high stress situations with their prejudice on board, on top of secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue.
And exhaustion.
Right? You just don't do well with it. And poor health. I mean all that,
it's
right?
Gotta
So,
be
it's all wrapped
it's
up.
got to be such a stressful job.
It is. And I know, and I don't want to dismiss the evils of law enforcement and the issues, but I'm just saying that if we're going to get to the next level, we got to have talk about reform and change. I think number 2, that we have to have mental health reevaluations. That I came on the department in 2001. That was the last time I got an evaluation. I retired and didn't have another evaluation
For decades.
Yeah. 17 years. No one else reevaluated me. Said, are you okay?
You're good once. That's it.
Yeah,
you're good to go.
You're good, right? So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you get a couple years in, you see some stuff.
You got to be reevaluated.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know how often. That's something that you have to work through and figure out what that looks like, but that needs to happen. If you're serving in a community that if you police a community, you must serve in it.
Dang,
that
especially
is
a community
good.
of color and a marginalized poor community. You cannot just go in as an authority figure and I'm going to be an enforcer and I don't go in and I don't serve. That
Right.
means that you have to be there's 40 hours of continuing education that a majority of us as professionals have to continue to learn and be upgraded on. You have to spend at least 8 hours in a community that you serve, that you not only police, but you have to serve. And then that way you work through a nonprofit, somehow, whatever it is, that nonprofit is going to serve a need in that community, that you're involved outside of your uniform.
Because it's not just because then it wouldn't just be enforcing. It would be
you're serving.
Well, anytime you position yourself, and I mean, you're lowering yourself. It's a status. I mean, it's you're up here, and then you're placing yourself down there, and then you have a heart for the people that begins to develop, the people that you're protecting.
Yeah, you just can't go in and just be. I'm just gonna write tickets and put people in jail. No, you've got to be able to go in and serve. I think also that that there needs to be some training reform. That we need to have conversations about. In training, how many officers are seeing other officers attacked and or killed in the line of duty on record? And we have to do the demographics on, are these brown and black bodies as perpetrators that then put us in a correspondence bias to when we see people like that, we go back to our training and we give them less margin.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Because of all the video that I've seen and consumed about, which we do need to be trained and see what mistakes other officers have made that cost them their life and or put them in dangerous situations. I don't say take that out. All I'm saying is there a correlation? We need to examine this. Is there a correlation to then we shoot first and ask questions later of brown and black individuals?
Right, because they go, oh, wait, I've been in this situation. I saw this. I've been trained for this. Yeah. Those neural pathways have been carved out.
Real talk. Real talk.
Training, I mean, from military to police, like you instantly go directly to what you
go back to training.
I mean, your training is just instantaneous.
You got to.
Yeah.
They got to have that. I think that one of the issues that we saw on the street with George Floyd was a pride issue. I think that in training we need to figure out how to give police officers an opportunity to tap out, to be able to be tapped by someone else where it's tactically sound and feasible to take them out of the red line phase and move someone else in who may be a little bit more at a place, manageable RPM wise.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That happens. We've all been redlined before to where we couldn't do anything but, you know what I mean? Just act out in rage or anger.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that you do that. I think
there's there can be that accountability, right? Like those 3 officers that stood by, if all 3 of them had flashed the sign, like let the guy
tap him. You know what I mean? Like, hey man, I got it.
Yeah.
Take this post. I got this one.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give somebody a break. You know what I mean? Those are all important things that you can do, and I think there needs to be some look at hiring practices. I think that we need to look at okay, so where are we hiring? Does our law enforcement organizations reflect the diversity of the communities that we're policing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? And then last but not least, I think there needs to be a universal use of force form that if there needs to be some metrics, a system, a point system that if you get so many dings, that your department begins to lose federal funding. That we need to start doing it on that level to where we can say that this use of force that this officer did on this day was off. That's -1 point or whatever it is. You know what I mean? A scale based on size of department, based on a number of people.
So some sort of matrix for sure.
A matrix that then says you're going to lose this much funding if you have another one of those.
I mean, this is similar, but not the same at all.
Yeah.
But the drinking age in states, you get to decide, but depending on what age it is, you may or may not get federal funding for your roads.
Yeah. Right.
And so
like that.
Get in line or lose the dollars.
Yeah. We have to police the police in a different way. So it's and it's not a knock on them. Like I said, I love them. You know what I mean? But I know from what my experience has been that we have to, because it's a very unique subculture and it's very insulated.
So can I ask you, what do you think the likelihood, of police reform happening is?
I think this is why you have to strike when the iron is hot. You can't. We've got people saying, well, I don't know why it takes all that. Well, I got to get the temperature up to where people are saying we got to do something different.
Right.
If we let it get cool, then people feel like it's okay. I can deal with it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we got to have people, and I'm interested. So if you're listening online and you know people who write legislation and laws, or you know who we need to get in touch with, let me know. Reach out, because we've got to start putting it in front of people right now while there's still protests, while there's still right. We got to start having the conversation now, like tomorrow, not like next week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 2 weeks from now,
whenever
or a month
we
from
get
now.
around to
it, we need to push it right now. And I know there's people who are already probably working on that. I'm not saying that we all need to come from different angles. We need to get on the same page and make sure. Listen, if you're going to ask people who don't know the insides or the culture of police to create reform, they're going to always miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to invite non-police officers to create reform for police officers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or you're going to ask higher ups within agencies to create reform for themselves that are not minorities or have not been over policed.
Right. And
that's another thing. That's another thing is like you said, like being a police officer, admitting that you're wrong. And now we're talking about on a large scale as the end result, right? We like a lot. That takes a large scale of the police force admitting that it was wrong.
Right.
So like, do you think that might
you're gonna have to. Obviously, I think that they need to be involved in it, but you're gonna have to have some unusual voices at the table.
Right.
You're not gonna be able to create the type of bipartisan and far-reaching and the nuance of knowing the culture and what really is an issue and what really isn't. You're not gonna be able to get that and get to it with people who don't know that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, I got a lot of law enforcement friends in my family. Well, you still don't know. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like when corporate, like whenever they try to implement new protocol and then they get it down to the workers and the workers are like, what are you doing? This is not the way to do this.
Right. And we've got laws that are being created like that. So we have to have people who are brave enough to kind of pull the curtain back, so to speak, and say that this is a type A field with people who are deeply love their community, maybe too much in love with authority, and people who need to make sure that whatever, you know what I mean? You got to have people who are able to talk that language and understand the real issues and to really say that, hey, listen, it has been, we haven't been taken care of well. And what the impact of that you're seeing that is, then you're seeing that is in body counts. And that's not only body counts on the street, but law enforcement officers they take their own lives more than criminals do.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Suicide is so high in law enforcement. Why is that? Well, there's a mental health issue. Well, we're not addressing the mental health in law enforcement. So we got to do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Man, Dion.
It's a lot. You want me to close?
That's a conversation that I have not heard yet.
Yeah.
And I think that all of that stuff is good stuff. And I hope you get to sit at a table to where you can present some of that stuff.
Yeah. And this is the thing about conversation is like, I had never even thought about that, but we had Dion on to have a conversation and he brings something you don't even think of. You know what I mean? Like, and how else are we going to know about that unless you sit down and talk to somebody, like things that you don't even think of.
This is why we're doing this. Yeah. Good stuff, man. Well, yeah, kind of last words.
Yeah, I'd like to hear, man, thoughts. If there's anything that we didn't get to hit on that like you're just like, man, it would be a disservice like not bringing up police reform, like, the one, couple statements that you might have.
I don't think I don't want anyone to be married to a vocation. Obviously, I think that we need to do what we do and do everything as unto Christ. So for my brothers and sisters in law enforcement, grateful for your sacrifice and what it means to go to work and not be completely understood, and to have the pressures of making split-second decisions and hoping that they're always right. That's tough, right? And I don't. That's not missed on me, and so I understand that. I also think that we have to see that Black folks and brown folks, especially, was talking about Black men and Black lives, that there's this positional asphyxia that's still in the world, that people are being put in positions where they can't breathe, and we have to be conscious of it, aware of it. We have to not only want to see it, but we have to want to help pick other people up, get them into better positions. How can I move you into a position where you can breathe? You know what I mean? What do you need me to do? Don't carry around guilt in such a way that it's such a burden that you don't get involved or get engaged because you feel so guilty of what you haven't done or what you have done. At this moment, I would rather you be more focused on the future than the past, as far as what you did not do or what you have done that has been insightful or incendiary. I encourage you to move forward. It's an hour where we need everyone, all hands on deck. I'm not asking for the pressure to leave. I like that you're feeling discomfort and you're feeling frustrated. The biggest question is what we do with that. It's good to have deep conversations and talk about it, but if we don't come out with something that's very simple and doable over and over again, if we can't scale it, then it's, you know what I mean, on a personal level, one-on-one, dinner is scalable. You always got to eat. I always got to eat. You know what I mean? I think those are the things that, for me, those are my perspectives. But there's other people who've got other things that are more refined, and they're better, they're good, and we need to have all those. I'm not saying that this is the only way. I'm saying this is just one perspective, and we need to have room for all of them. And it's going to take this and that. Mm-hmm. You know, it's never just one thing. It's going to take a combination. And so if this conversation didn't scratch you in every way that you need to be scratched, then just know that means that it's time for you to step up to the plate. You know what I mean? Yeah. Then don't get frustrated because we didn't cover it all and we missed something. Yeah. It never was intended to be exhaustive. Sure. But right. what we do want to see is us moving the needle, and that means that I'm playing the long game. Yeah. So I don't want to, I know that it won't be something that we're going to just be able to get, the protest may stop, but the problem won't. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes. So we have to know that and still move forward. We have to know that and still make decisions. Yeah. When the heat has subsided, we still have to be hot internally. You know what I mean? That's what I'm praying for, that there's a jump start in the hearts, that this heat externally has gotten its way into my heart and stirred me to where I can't be the same in here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're gonna rebuild the stores. You know, they'll repave the streets. They'll put new windows up. People go back to shopping. Products will be put back in. Mm-hmm. But I can't have this be changed too. Right. Right. I want my heart to still be wrecked in some ways when everything else has been remodeled. Ooh. You know what I mean? I want my heart to still be wrecked, man, so that I can then say, you know what, it mattered, it changed me. And so I want us to do that. This is a serious time. Listen, God is so wise. He's ordained for us to be alive right now. Dang. Yeah. Right now. He chose you to be alive right now. Now the question is what we're going to do with that. Man. Right. What are we going to do with that? Are you alive as a part of the problem or a part of the solution? Right. Right. Yikes. Well, man, I don't want to add to and take away. Go ahead. I just want I just want to thank you. I really want to thank you.
Yeah, really, honestly, for coming on and for sharing your heart, man, and like giving us a different perspective and answering questions. Because I mean, a lot of these things change my perspective too. Just listening to you talk and just kind of internalizing that and going through it, man. Like, I really appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, I really do.
I think we were all,
and I've been wrong in this podcast. You know what I mean? And like, you know,
season one. Just kidding.
Yeah. You know, but that's good though, and just goes to show this is kind of like a litmus test for what on this kind of scale about what you're talking about, like having conversations. And I believe things changed, you know, in our hearts and our minds too, for sure. Man, you know? Yeah. And so
thank you guys for having me.
Yes. Thank you for being on.
Yeah. Humbled.
I want to stay wrecked in here when everything else is remodeled out there. Dang.
Yeah.
Make a shirt. That's all I got. You got anything to add?
Man, I'm I'm thankful you came on. I told Jason,
Chris.
man, I need this. I need this conversation because I've had a lot of, I'd say hatred. I've had a lot of not godly emotions. The fruit of the Spirit's been cut down from the vine at times. And so I needed something that was truthful, but also full of hope and also giving direction. And so I'm thankful.
Yeah.
Chris, remember this too, that Jesus was so sober that even when they were nailing nails in his hands, he says, forgive them for they don't know what they do. We've got a lot of people who are just posting stuff, saying stuff. We got to realize where they're at spiritually, emotionally. Right. They're babes.
Yeah.
And so even though they may be old, they wield a lot of power and they got a lot of influence. They're babies. They don't know. Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that we dismissed from correcting them.
For
but
sure.
we have to definitely know that if for me to get that, to be to where I want to slap somebody in the face and, and just completely check out and redline, I got to understand also and remember that everybody's on a different level in their journey. Right. You know what I mean? We're all, we want them all to be mature, but they're not all mature.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's a good word.
Well, to close it out, I want to thank Steve Exum, who's been watching us on Facebook. He just posted a verse. I looked it up, and I think it's fitting as we close out. So I'll read in verse 5 and 6. Conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making